Hey, how's it going, guys? One of my first impressions of Dungeons 3. This is a game by Realm Forge Studios and published by Calypso Media Digital. This is a strategy simulation management type game in a fantasy setting. It's basically a combination of Dungeon Keeper and a light amount of Warcraft 3. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but basically you have a dungeon that you build, you mine it out, you build rooms, you gather your forces, and you defend it from enemies invading with traps that you can build and trigger manually, and then you send out your forces to the Overworld, which is what you're seeing right now, and you invade the enemies until they can't invade you anymore. So that's pretty much the gist of it. A lot of games have been trying to emulate Dungeon Keeper of old, and I say of old because there was a new Dungeon Keeper game, but it was a crappy mobile game, so we don't really count that. Anyway, a lot of games try to emulate Dungeon Keeper, and we get a lot of flops. One game that actually did very well, which was actually made by some of the original developers, was War for the Overworld, which was almost a plagiarized version of Dungeon Keeper in every way. It was basically trying to evoke the exact same feelings and memory of Dungeon Keeper, but it wasn't really too original in its own right. Had some originality, but that was about it in terms of character designs. Here we have a game that mixes it up a bit. Like I said, we have some Warcraft 3 elements, although they're not too fleshed out. Dungeons has always been flown under the radar because it's a little bit more simplistic than you might expect. Some people might say Dungeon Keeper for babies, but I actually find this one in particular, I haven't played the other games, this game in particular to be actually quite good. It's more casual, but it's also more thematic than something like Dungeon Keeper would be. It's not nearly as dark, but it's got a lot of humor to make up for it, and I honestly think that it's fairly well written. Sometimes. Anyway, let's have a look at the options menu, and then we'll get right into a campaign game. So, you have health bars, you can change these to have them always on, or just when someone has taken damage, which is cool. Autosave intervals, which is nice. Evil laughter, you can actually change your laugh in the game. You can actually have a little emote for that, which is cool. Narrator chattiness. So the narrator talks a lot in this game. The narrator is the guy who voiced the Stanley Parable, and he's actually really great. The problem here is that when you first start the game, you're going to be kind of bothered by it because there's a lot, and I mean a lot of dialogue, a lot of cutscenes. Well, one really long cutscene for the campaign when you started out, and you can skip that one, and the narration is pretty good. You have to let it grow on you, but when you start the game up immediately and you really just want to play it, and you're kind of bombarded by a lot of dialogue, it can get a little bothersome. So I can understand if people have something against that, but it'll grow on you, don't worry. Scroll speed. You have the options, two separate options for going around the edge, or just, how you move it in-game, which is cool, when you use the W, A, S, and D keys, or if you just push your mouse to the edge of the screen. That's cool. Sound options. So it goes from 0 to 1, which is weird, instead of 1 through 10. I don't know why it uses a decimal system, but whatever. It works. Subtitles, on or off. Graphics. Biggest weakness right now. So the game actually runs very nicely, at least for me. I haven't really gotten a massive dungeon yet, but I'm running a 390 with a 4790K. That is admittedly a little last gen, but it's still fairly decent for a system of, my caliber. I mean, it's, hard to get that kind of performance very cheap. But it does have full screen on or off, and you do have a variety of resolution options, including 512 by 288s. So I guess it just scales to what your maximum monitor is. That's my assumption. Controls. So some of these hotkeys are a little bit weird. You have your move attack be the F key, which is weird. And you have to actually hit F and then left click. So it's, kind of off. You do have the ability to select all your units in the overworld. There's hotkeys that are there. It's just going to take a little bit of time to get used to. You also can rotate your traps with the O button. Alright, let's get into a game here. Because the camera scrolling is going to make me a little bit nauseous. There is multiplayer and co-op in here. I haven't tested either of them yet. Again, this is a very low-profile release. I would call it a double-A release, so there's probably people playing right now. But I wouldn't get it just for the multiplayer. At least not yet. Wait for the community to be realized. Alright, so welcome to Dungeons 3. Quite a nice looking game, actually. For $40, it's not too bad. It's very colorful, I gotta say. Texture quality is not too bad either. Again, I would like to see some graphics options, but, you know, if it works, if it runs well, which it does, it runs well. But unfortunately, it seems that I'm locked to 60 frames per second, so that's a little annoying. Anyway, so you might notice if you've played Dungeon Keeper, yeah, this looks very similar to that. Yeah, like I was saying earlier. So you have this dungeon, as you'd imagine. You have this dungeon heart right here, which is basically your core. If you lose this, you lose the game. You have all these rooms that you can make to hold various things. So here's, like, you know, I have this treasury room right here, which is surrounding this gold vein. So my imps would mine that, you know, we would just get gold. And gold's used for purchasing upgrades, making more rooms, you know, like you would expect. Now the rooms can be used to house things for your army. So let's actually have a look at the research menu. So at the start, you're going to be purchasing a lot of your research with gold. So here's one of the things. So these are broken up to various quadrants. So you have your throne room right here. Then you have your horde upgrades. So these are your basic ground combat units. You have your imps, which attack very quickly and do a lot of damage, but they can't take a lot of damage or else they'll die. They're melee units, and they have an ability that's passive that allows them to not be the priority of enemy attacks, which is really cool. So if you have, like, another unit that's going to take all the damage, they can just, you know, wail away at other enemies. And that unit that you might use is called the Orc. And he, as you would imagine, is pretty beefy, strong, tanky, but he's a little slow. And then you have the Naga, which you have to research. And these guys, or gals, I'm not sure, can heal or spellcast for damage, which is pretty cool, but you want to use them for healers. They're a little bit more expensive at 500 gold apiece, compared to the imps, which are 250, and the orcs that are 300, but they're really great for your armies, and you want to research these right away. The problem is, of course, that you can't exactly research these with gold. You have to go and get what are called these evil points. And you do that by invading the overworld. If we click over on the mini-map over here, we can look at the overworld. Look how pretty, yes. Then we click over here, evil. So yeah, it takes a little bit of time getting used to when you have to switch between the over and underworld. Thankfully, the mini-maps are on 2 common places. It's just, you gotta remember, wait, how do I get back to the overworld again? Oh, you just click over here.
Let's go, men. Double the watches and leave something for me.
So, let's explain a little bit more about the gameplay before we get into the story and the thematics, while they talk over me.
I can smell your beer breath all the way down into my dungeon, you drunken shrimp.
Spread out and find her.
The presence of the inconspicuous and rainbow-colored dog eagle's army was no longer a secret. In fact, it was amazing it had escaped the warriors of wood for so long. Well, their leader was a dwarf and he had lots of beer, but hopefully the dungeon's defenses are ready.
Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to mine out some of these areas that I'm doing right now. As you would imagine, you can do that from... So the mechanic carried over from the original Dungeons games and Dungeon Keeper as a whole, really. It's kind of a subgenre of games at this point. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a little resting area for our horde so that we can get units. So we're going to get a little hideout right here. We're going to research that for 500. We're going to go back, and then we're going to purchase some creatures. The UI could use a little bit of work. It kind of juts out here, and it's kind of big, but, you know, at least I can identify everything that's on here. So we're going to just get an imp, which kind of just spawns where your camera is, which is kind of cool. Animations could use a little bit of work, especially in combat, and when enemies die or your allies die, they just kind of get flung everywhere. We're at a population limit right now, so we're going to actually research to get a few more so that we can defend our dungeon a little bit more properly. Where are they? Oh, there's some red dots over here. No? It's just the... Okay. There are dungeon inhabitants, and then there's invaders from the overworld. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to select our army over here, and then we're going to click this button, which picks up all of our guys. All of our military guys. It doesn't pick up our little worker imps that have been mining out these areas. We're going to drop them here, and they're just going to go ham and kill all these guys, which is pretty cool. Now, your creatures have various needs. So you have your hero character over here, which you can upgrade. although you can't really do a whole lot. It's what a lot of people were saying, like, oh, it's kind of like Warcraft 3. Not really. It's got some elements like it where, you know, you control a hero unit, you can upgrade them a little bit, but there's not a ton of interesting RPG mechanics, like giving them special abilities that change their entire playstyle or let them counter other types of units. You just kind of do incremental, you know, plus attack, plus armor, plus damage abilities. So, you have to maintain your army by building things like sleeping areas or feeding areas so that they don't get hungry, because if they do get hungry or if they don't sleep enough or whatever, they will go on strike, and they'll have this little sign when you try to tell them to do something. They might like move to where you want them to go, but they won't attack. They'll just be like, nope, on strike. So you have to do things like, you know, open the room menu and build a little hideout. So we're going to do that, and our imp's going to do it for us. We're going to actually do another one over here. Now we also have a feeding area over here, and you can hover over it and get some information about, you know, it's officially a gobbler farm, efficiency 90% in gobblers, 13 out of 15 currently. So our army's well fed, but as we increase our population limit, we're going to have an issue when we have more units here. They're going to be wanting to eat more food, they're going to be wanting to rest. And on top of that too, that we have to pay them. So that's another big thing in this game. So payday, that's counting down currently. And it shows the cost of payday, so every unit gets a payment. Yeah, you thought they were going to do this for free. No, they're not. So we have a maximum gold amount that we can acquire, and we get gold by mining out these areas. So, you know, gold right over here. And we can put these little treasuries out down on the ground that'll hold gold for us, so they're kind of like these little placement points so that our imps don't have to walk all the way back to the dungeon heart. So that's cool. And of course we can have them mine these gold veins until, you know, they're completely depleted. You don't want to mine too deep. You might be thinking like, oh, you just mine out the area entirely and get all the gold for your imps. Well, that could lead to some problems. For example, over here, we have an issue with these dragon lizards. We mined this out, and we discovered this little dragon lizard encampment. So we're going to actually have to reinforce this position and clear that area out, because these guys will attack our core and sometimes our own units. The unit AI is not too bad in this game. It needs some work. I would have preferred if they kind of ran around and try to engage enemies at their own leisure, like in Dungeon Keeper, and then, you know, when they go to the Overworld, that's when you have full control. But here it's a problem where, you know, they do rush to defend your core, but when there's, like, you know, some, I don't know, spiders working around in your dungeon and destroying stuff, or if an enemy's invading, they don't really become quick to respond. You gotta do a lot of babysitting, you gotta pick them up. You can do that, of course, by left-clicking them and then just dropping them, or, you know, going to the army panel over here, like I did before. You can select by type, too. So that's pretty nice. And you can just give them a good old slap sometimes if you want them to just work harder or move faster. If I can actually not screw this up. Actually, I had to drop them off first. Yeah, there you go. Alright. So, let's assemble our army and then go to the Overworld. I think everyone's rested up nicely. So you have places like mana shrines to hold all your mana, which are used for your spells. There's quite a few mechanics in this game, and some say it's like Dungeon Keeper Light. And I can kind of agree with that. There's not nearly as many interesting mechanics or things that are really going to keep you interested in this game, but the big thing that you should be aware of when purchasing this is you're getting a thematic experience, a casual experience, but a thematic one. You're getting a lot of dialogue, you're getting a lot of voice acting, you're getting a lot of some pretty cool campaign scenarios, for lack of a better word. Alright, so they're actually rallying nicely here, so they're going to engage these enemies. If you hover over your guys, you can see some stuff like their healing, their hunger, their sleep, if they're deprived of sleep. It's always important to keep an eye on that. If a minion is like dangerously close on like striking or getting angry because they, you know, whatever, not enough food, not enough sleep, it'll tell you right over here, so you don't have to manage that. And it's not a lot to manage either, because right now we only have like 6 guys we really need to pay attention to. You don't really have to worry about the workers. So we could start building traps, we could set up that trade, but I kind of want to get these Naga set up so that we can heal our units. Over here you might notice these are like the neutral buildings. The treasure, you know, holds gold. The Gobbler Farm feeds. Over here, this is kind of where all your demons and your spells kind of come from. And here you get some undead spells a little later on in the campaign, and you also can generally get like undead units, so it's kind of its own class system where you just kind of pick your tree, and you know, as long as you have enough gold, you can just keep, you know, doing whatever you want. You don't have to be locked to a certain talent tree of specific spells. So, you know, here your undead, your demons, your horde. It's a decent variety of stuff. Alright, so let's rally up. So we're going to do this. Click the rally army button. And we're going to drop them all into this entrance, where they will exit. And the camera conveniently takes you to the overworld. So now we're not here anymore on this minimap, we're actually over here. Alright, so the RTS mechanics are probably the weakest part of the game, but they're still cool. They're very basic, though. So, you know, you just move them around, you have an attack, you have some subsets of spells, but a lot of them are just auto-cast, which is a bit of a shame. I would have liked to seen something like where you can research certain abilities, that, like, you know, like the footmen in Warcraft 3 is a good example, where you can have them lock their shields, they'll move slower, but they'll take less range damage. In Warcraft 3, you also have the option of leveling up your hero and giving them special spells that do all kinds of cool things. And you can even get items, and you have item shops, and you have creeps on the map where you can conquer them for gold and experience, and there's experience here, but it's all incremental, very basic, not very interesting. There is a spell system, which is cool. Like, we can just bombard these guys with a meteor shower. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. It is awesome, but the actual mechanics themselves of, you know, what your units can do, not a whole lot there. And some people are going to be turned off by that. I think you really want to play this game for the campaign narration. We haven't heard a lot of that. We will in a second. We'll stick around long enough. Basically, you have a lot of fourth wall humor, a lot of references to other games and other, you know, media, Lord of the Rings, stuff like that. None of it's cringe-inducing so far. Some of them can be a little bit grating early on, but it's delivered fairly well. So, you know, you do have it grow on you, and it is, you know, some of the dialogue is actually quite funny, I will admit. Like, I was laughing out loud a little bit. Alright, so we captured one of these evil buildings, and now we can research with these evil points that are generated automatically, as long as we control it. We can research some Naga, so we're going to do that. And should we do anything else? We do have a lot of gold. We can't really do a whole lot else right now. We can increase our population. We're probably going to do that, actually, a little bit. We don't want to have too many units because the payday, the upkeep, is going to really hurt us in the long run if we just have a ton of units and they're just not doing anything, or we're constantly babysitting them. So let's get a Naga or two. And let's actually go for 9 population in total. So let's just do this one more time since we have the research points. And let's get, should we get an orc? Let's get an imp, or a goblin, because we have a lot of range right here. We need some more melee. Okay, so let's rally them up. Oh, we might get attacked over here. No, we're fine. Alright, so let's rally them up. You can only rally them up in the base. It would be kind of weird if you could just drop them anywhere on the overworld map. Now, the transition between the two, like I said, isn't exactly perfect. You know, sometimes you have this forced camera pan, which can be nice, but if you're just doing units in increments, like you send an army out, and then, okay, I want to build one more before we go out, like, before you even get a chance to build it, oh, it just pans you back out, and then you gotta go right back over here. That's a little annoying. Other times, it's just not giving you a good indicator when you get attacked at your core. Sometimes I just completely ignore it, and like I just don't see it. Like sometimes the narrator has to tell me, and that's like, you know, after the enemy's done some significant damage to my core. So that's something to bear in mind. It can be a little bit annoying to transition between the two. Alright, so on this map we have to capture these objectives, these bonus objectives, to help us with the main objective. And of course the bonus objectives are optional, but we really want to capture them because they allow us to spawn entire armies of zombies infinitely, which is pretty cool. So the characters in this game are kind of neat. You have the good characters, which are this racist dwarf, ironically. and you have this paladin who is the foster father of this character that I'm playing as named Talia. So Talia kind of has a mixed personality. She's, you know, unapologetically evil, but also trying to be good. And she has this, like, split personality where she's just kind of fighting it, and it sounds like a generic concept, but it's actually kind of funny in that the narrator even remarks on, you know, like, oh, really, you're going to do this again with your split personalities? Like this.
This is not what the goddess wants. Ha! Exactly. You got it in one. Time for me to raise a few undead.
And the voice acting, I gotta say, there is a very limited amount of it. There isn't really a whole ton for units, which is a little bit disappointing. But the narrator, Talia, and some of the other characters are actually quite nice.
I am Isildur's heir. I mean, the deathly pale evil's messenger. Fight for me, and I will consider your oath fulfilled. An oath that you never swore. Excuse me, I seem to have mixed a few things up.
Splendid speech, but good enough for the mindless hordes buried here, who excitedly signaled their approval, even if it was with nothing more than a moaned. And so, the Walking Dead arose to serve the abominable evil. And of course, his eloquent envoy with a split personality.
Hey, I can hear you.
I certainly hope so. I don't want to just waste my insults.
We'll talk later. Go, undead. Destroy the living.
So, like I said before, the dialogue can be hit or miss. That was an example of it being pretty decent, although you kind of got to get really into the whole atmosphere of the game to really enjoy it. Some out-of-context dialogue blobs are just not quite good enough for something like this. Although, you know, it should stand on its own most of the time, and sometimes it does. It's quite nice overall, and the voice work is, once again, great. It's just that the combat is a little bit basic on the RTS world segment. It's just kind of underwhelming. I'm hoping that some expansions can flesh it out a little bit more, patches, whatever. But it's kind of running into a problem which the second game had. I had never played that one, but apparently it's showing some signs. It's very simplistic, but it's got some cool elements here and there, and apparently Dungeons 2 was like a little bit lower budget, whereas here they've actually improved a lot of the thematic aspects from what I understand. So that's all well and good. And it does help that they don't charge like $60 for this game. You can get War for the Overworld, but that game just has less going on for it thematically. You know, you do have the cool narrator, you do have some dark humor, but it's really just for the gameplay. There's not a whole lot going on for its story. And you just don't have a whole lot going on outside of the mechanics. Whereas here, it just seems like it's kind of lacking that. But I do find it fun to play, you know, just to relax, sit back, and play for, you know, 20 minutes per mission. And you can increase the difficulty for the campaign mode. And you can also try out multiplayer. But overall, I think it's an interesting game. The traps are a little bit underdeveloped, but they are quite nice once you get them going. You can build stuff like you can have doors, but you could also have some like boulder traps where you trigger them manually. You just click on them and a boulder just hits a bunch of enemies. You have like flame traps, spike traps, you know, generic stuff, but you know, they're fairly well done and cool. And the unit variety is actually quite nice. I haven't unlocked the undead yet, but the imps, they respawn, which is really cool. The orcs, or the horde, I should say, you know, they have their own very specific unit types. You know, imps, orcs, naga. There's just not a whole lot of them, and they aren't mechanically super interesting. There's that thing with the goblins where they can just kind of avoid damage, but that's about it. There's not a whole lot of interest going on. There's not any RPG elements that would really change up your gameplay strategy or items with your hero characters, at least thus far. And this is 3 hours in. And I did try to play skirmish mode, and I couldn't really find anything else of interest that's worth noting. I will say that it's not too hand-holdy. The animations could use a little bit more work. The stock sounds could be a little annoying at times. But it is cool to just build out your dungeon, to send out your armies to explore a little bit, and cast a spell. It's quite a bit of fun. I can recommend it. But it's not too mechanically deep. If that puts you off, maybe try War for the Overworld for a game like this. But if you want something a little bit different, a little bit more thematic, more cutscenes, more dialogue, I'd at least look at this game. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. I'm out.